Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Real Money Talk podcast. In this weekly show, we give you the real talk about money. We eliminate the fine print, we junk the jargon, and we explain how you can make smarter financial decisions. We're not millionaires, we're thousandaires, and we know you are too. So this show is for you. We want to talk about money because it affects everyone, rich and poor, and so money shouldn't only be the occupation of the 1%, but rather the 99%. And if you like the show, don't forget to like and subscribe. The more you like and subscribe, the more shows we can make, funded off the backs of our sponsors. Today we have the pleasure of being joined by Rob Carrick, who is one of Canada's most trusted and highly read personal finance experts. He joined the Globe and Mail as an investment reporter in 1996, and soon after joining the National Paper of Record, launched its own personal finance column. He's written or co-written 5 books on personal finance, including his latest, How Not to Move Back In With Your Parents, a young person's guide to financial empowerment. He's made a career of writing about personal finance for millennials specifically. So we thought it was fitting to speak to Rob about all the money matters millennials currently face. So thanks for joining us today, Rob, and welcome to the show.
Glad to do it.
So just to kick things off, we will start with our money mess up or money makeup section. And I will start. I had started a pretty good habit of recording in my phone every dollar that I was spending, just so I had a sense of where my budget was at in terms of my discretionary spending. And I stuck to it really well. I do it for each paycheck. For the end of last month, I was perfectly under budget, tracked everything, was feeling good, and then got a little cocky. And throughout June, I didn't track one thing. So I haven't gone through my credit card statements yet
to see just how bad.
Yeah, exactly. Just how bad I messed up. But I am expecting a bit of a shock there. So that's my money mess up.
I went to my son's fun fair last night, and we spent $30 in tickets for balloon rides and inflatable things, and he just stayed in one station the whole time, and the person there wasn't even charging us tickets. Just $30 gone.
Just be glad you weren't at Disneyland.
Yeah,
it's true.
It would cost you quite a bit more than $30.
$40 for like a Mickey Mouse balloon.
Exactly.
So for me, I had a ton of Aeroplan points, and I redeemed them the worst way possible for a gift card because I really wanted a Dyson vacuum. Walked away losing a couple of valuable points.
To maximize those rewards. That. And how about you, Rob?
Well, I know it's millennials who are often criticized for overspending on food and drinks, but my wife and I kind of went a little bit wild in the last week or two because we're a lot of stuff going on, and we have just been eating out an awful lot. And looking back on it, I think, we kind of overdid it a bit. But anyway, we'll even it out in the long term. But I do feel like that expense kind of surged in the last little while on our household balance sheet.
Yeah, it happens. I find the busier you are, the more you're spending on things that you otherwise would not.
Totally. You know what? It's when you're in your calm routine, that's when it's really easy to follow all your savings routines. But
exactly,
when things get off whack, and you're just reaching for convenience.
For sure. If I've got time Sunday night and I can make a few meals for the beginning of the week, I'm great. But if I don't have that time, buy lunch.
Say hello to every day. Yeah,
exactly.
Yep.
Great. So today we are talking all things money and millennials. So I know, as you mentioned, us millennials are often criticized for the amount of spending that we do. But do you think, from your perspective, Rob, that millennials have it harder than previous generations when it comes to saving, investing, getting into the housing market?
I do. And I guess it was about 2012, I actually wrote a column about this. And a programmer at the Globe and I collaborated on an online tool that helped people from previous generations compare financial conditions to to the years when they were young adults compared to now. So we looked at house prices and tuition fees and a few other factors. And I think it painted a pretty definitive picture that it is tougher today. Now, I'm a boomer. I'm a late generation boomer, and I graduated from university in the mid 1980s. It was sort of a post big recession at that point in time, but I have no trouble saying that I think I had it much easier than today's millennials do. I have 2 sons, 25 and 22. So I have a good eye view on this. I've got nieces and nephews. I've got lots of Globe readers who are millennials who report to me what's going on. It's tougher. Houses are way more expensive compared to incomes. That's the key measure. Tuitions have gone up at roughly double the inflation rate on average. And to me, one of the biggest issues is the gig economy. So many companies, when they're hiring millennials, are saying it's a contract. You're not getting a pension, you're not getting benefits, and the job pretty much will end in 6 months, 18 months, 2 years, whatever. And it's hard to build a financial foundation on temporary work.
For sure. My first few jobs were contract jobs, and I just felt like that was the reality.
And without that security, that foundational security of pensions and job guarantees, it's probably even harder just mentally to process buying a house and processing or walking through life like that.
It's tough even to move out of your parents' house in some cases. You know, when I see how I'm in Ottawa, and it's a hot housing market, and the rental market is starting to firm up, but it's nothing like Toronto. When I hear how much it costs to rent a semi-decent place in Toronto, I think, how do you even plan to take on rent? Because if you want to build up an emergency fund to cover your rent in between jobs, you've got to put away a lot of money, and then your weekly costs are expensive too. I think it's really hard to sort of get yourself into that financially independent track of adult life when you've got a temporary job and you haven't got credentials and you haven't got contacts which make you confident you're going to land another contract after that. Very tough. I think that is an undercovered challenge in the economy for young people today.
For sure.
You're actually in the minority because 58% of those between 36 and 54 actually think millennials are soft. So it's pretty.
You know what? I think if you were to have done similar polls through history, the generation just ahead of or in advance, the people who are slightly older than the current cohort of young adults will always look on younger people and criticize them.
For sure. I can't wait to just stand on my lawn and shake my hand, shake my fist.
Yeah, I think there's something about maturing in life that makes you sour on young people, and it's just a sad commentary on society. I have had so much pushback on all the writing I've done about millennials over the years. Boomers and seniors telling me, "Oh yeah, they got it hard. I had it way harder," or my generation had it harder based on my one single person's experience. You know what? You will just have to keep making the argument. I find that anybody who has millennial kids or grandkids or nieces and nephews gets this storyline. But if you don't have that direct pipeline to the voices of people who are in the situation, they don't have a clue.
So obviously there are some unique challenges for millennials when it comes to money, but we have to shoulder some of that burden ourselves. What are you seeing? What are the big financial mistakes commonly seen among millennials?
Well, here's what I'm going to be writing about in the next little while, and it is millennials who are fortunate enough to be in company pension plans, where their employer will match any contribution they make, but they are not joining the plan. And so they are passing up employer contributions. Basically, like they're saying no to part of their salary.
Giving up free money.
Free money.
Yeah. Free money. They're leaving it on the table. It's sitting there waiting for them. Their employer has said, it's for you. All you have to do is put a buck in. We put a buck on the table. They're not doing it. That's pretty sad. Another thing millennials are doing is, we can talk a lot about how it's harder to get into the housing market and houses aren't going to appreciate as much in price and how there's a danger of interest rates rising over the long term. But millennials are super keen to get into the housing market. The polls I see say their level of enthusiasm for housing may even exceed the average for the entire population. And I really wish some of them would just cool it a bit and really take a look at their finances and see if they can afford it. And if they can afford it, I say, great, you buy that house, enjoy. But if you can't, rent. Do something else. Don't get yourself into a financially precarious situation of homeownership just because you bought all the propaganda. And it worries me how much millennials are buying the propaganda on homeownership.
Yeah, I actually found an article from you that said only about 41% of millennials who have some savings are investing their money in stocks, and they kind of associate the stock market with a risky investment as opposed to the housing market. It's kind of like a loss.
Super interesting point you raised there. I think millennials, because a lot of them sort of became financially aware after the financial crisis and the stock market meltdown, they sort of see stocks as kind of a crapshoot. Now, some millennials are really enthusiastic about finding hot stocks and making a lot of money off cannabis or artificial intelligence or something like that. But a lot of them just think, I don't really want any part of that stock market thing. Housing makes sense to me. My parents made a bunch of money in it. I will focus my financial resources on that. And I think that's a mistake. I think you need to have a balanced sort of portfolio of assets in your life. So you want to have a house, sure, good, but you also need liquid investments in the stock market and the bond market, diversified portfolios, all that stuff. You need both. Your parents most likely had both, and you're going to need both too.
I know when I was starting out in the workforce and I was saving some money, I sort of was paralyzed in not being able to make a decision with that money. So it kind of just sat in a low interest savings account, not accruing any sort of interest. until I eventually read up on robo-advisors and decided, something is better than nothing, and just started making regular contributions into that. For someone in a similar situation who maybe is just graduating university, has a handle on their debt, and is starting to think about investing in the future, what would you recommend for a first step in starting an investment portfolio, or whether that be a savings account for a home if that's what they want, or the real the stock market, that sort of thing?
Totally get where you're going. We actually designed a tool that's available online for our millennial readers. It's called the Real Life Money Launcher. Real Life Money Launcher. Google it. Use it. It helps millennials decide what are your financial goals, and helps them sort of allot money to the various goals, short-term, long-term, and it gives them ideas about where to put the money. For me, if you're saving for anything, that means you probably want to buy whatever you're saving for in the next 5 or so years, within the next 5 or so years. And that means you want something super safe, a high interest savings account. The returns are not great, but they're about 2.3% right now at most. There's even one online bank. At this point in time, as we talk, it's paying 2.8%, but your money is kept super safe in return for that modest interest rate. But if you're investing for the long term, I think robo-advisors are an awesome option, but it's for money that you won't need for 10 years or more. So it's long-term money. Don't use a robo-advisor, or don't invest in stocks or ETFs or anything like that for your home down payment, a home you're going to buy in the next 5 or so years. Don't do it if you're saving for a wedding. Don't do it if you're saving to go back for an MBA in a little while. This is for the long term. Robo-advisors are a great, cheap, efficient way to go from doing nothing with your money to having an efficient, properly managed investment portfolio. And I cannot recommend them enough for millennials who are just starting out and aren't really sure what to do. I think if you give your money to a robo-advisor, you will be well served as long as you have that 10-year horizon.
We'll put the tool in the show notes.
Yeah,
for sure.
Great, that'd be awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, so you mentioned having a lot of millennial readers, and I'm sure a lot of them contact you with questions about their finances. What are some of the common questions that you receive from them, and what are the answers that you give?
A lot of them are wondering about strategizing for the housing market. So what I'm trying to tell them is you need to be able to afford the mortgage, but look ahead to the other costs as well. Don't be sort of lulled into thinking you're in good shape because the bank has said you can qualify to borrow $750,000. You're thinking, well, I only want $500. I'm in great shape. Well, do you understand about property taxes and about home maintenance and upkeep and the cost of renos? Are you planning to have kids? Well, daycare costs are a big expense. Are you going to be driving a car? Are you moving to the suburbs? Maybe you'll need an extra car. That's what I'm trying to get them to understand, that there's a lot more to home ownership than just the mortgage. I know you have a high rent, and you think, well, the mortgage rate is the mortgage payment's a little cheaper. That's a home run for me. Not necessarily. The full package of home ownership costs are way higher than renting, even when rents are at their most expensive. So that's one. How do you get started in investing? That's another one. I often recommend robo-advisors or some of the new balanced fund ETFs that are becoming more and more popular right now. Another popular one is, should I invest or make extra payments on my student debt? That's for the person who has enough money to go beyond the mandatory minimum payment for their student debt on a month-by-month basis. I'm big on paying down the debt.
Yeah.
Some people say, but I can make a better return investing. I'm kind of skeptical that they can. Maybe possible, but on a consistent basis, I think you are guaranteed to have a great return on your money from paying down the debt. Student debt is not quite as cheap as maybe people imagine. Interest rates have gone up a little bit in the last 18 months or so. I think it is a great return on your buck to pay that debt down, get it cleared, and then you've got a whole other level of financial freedom, because if you were paying $300 or $400 a month to service your debt, all of a sudden you're richer by that amount per month.
And paying down that debt is increasing your net worth, correct?
Correct.
On your point about housing, how much of a role do you think FOMO, and especially like millennials and how tied they are to social media, seeing their friends buying houses, how much does that play a role, and how do you kind of like, as a millennial, not get absorbed into that? Well,
it's interesting you mentioned FOMO, and I think it is a huge pressure. But you know where I think the number one pressure point for millennials on home ownership? That I think it's their parents. When I hear renters talking about, how they get a lot of static about it, it's often from their parents. Their parents tell them, oh, you're paying your landlord's rent. It's a big waste of money. You should own. I think that really weighs on them heavily. But a close number two in terms of social pressure is social media and seeing everybody else sort of bragging about their lifestyle and feeling inadequate because of that. I don't really have a perfect solution for that, but I think people have got to take ownership of their financial position wherever it is and wear it well. you know what, this is my position. I'm renting for now. I'm saving up. I plan to buy in X number of years. For now, it suits me to rent. It gives me flexibility and affordability. You know what? Just own it. All our financial choices are valid as long as we've reasoned out why we're doing them in a good way. And buying a house later on is a perfectly valid situation. I've actually mapped out how you could buy a house at age 40 and still, a millennial could do that and still be just fine financially. And renting has a lot of things going for it. You're not wasting a lot of money on new roofs and fixing foundations and paving driveways. You have no obligations. If you get a better job somewhere else, you just give your landlord notice and you go. Homeowners are tied down. They're never going to tell you that part of the story on social media, but all the spending they're doing just to keep their house running.
Yeah, I know someone who's actually doing a reno right now, and he's really stressed all the time, which is kind of weird.
I'm very stressed about my reno right now. And the reality of, I'm borrowing from my home equity line of credit. I have a lot of equity in the house. I've been in the market for a number of years now to build up that equity. And it's incredible how stressed I get just in finally making the payments, even though I know it's going to cost me a lot of money in the long run. Just even making that initial payment has me flustered, and already I've stopped into the house and everything's going really well, but there is some signs of possible scope creep where it's like, oh, and you should probably fix that foundation too, and oh, this is actually falling apart, you got to replace that, and it's kind of like, well, I have a budget.
You know what they never tell you about? I'm a homeowner of, my wife and I have owned homes since the early 90s. And one thing I've learned is they never stop costing you money.
Yeah.
Whenever we get a tax refund or any big amount of money, it's like the house is just like sucking it up out of our wallets, The house just says, I'll take that, thanks. There's always something. Your house is never in a state of utter perfection. And if it is, just wait, because something bad's happening.
Yeah.
That part of homeownership is never reported. It's just basically, it is a continual, never-ending cash drain.
Agreed.
Sure. So we've talked a little bit about some of the disadvantages that millennials have that we face. But have you noticed any advantages that we have over previous generations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think millennials are far more wired into the importance of financial literacy and personal finance than any previous generation. They really do, to me, seem to get the idea that there's more on their shoulders than maybe previous generations might have thought. I mean, in my day, you learned by doing. And so you made a lot of mistakes and you thought, well, I'll never do that again. And you moved on. Millennials seem to more understand that, I need to get this right and I need to get my head in the game and study some of this stuff. And, I've seen credit card default rates. I saw a report a few years ago showing that millennials actually had a lower default rate on their credit cards than the broader population.
It's interesting.
I'm seeing it in the kind of questions I'm getting, the critical thinking I'm seeing about personal finance, the openness to using alternatives to the big banks that previous generations wouldn't have shown, this unwillingness to take dictation from financial advisors telling them how it is and what they should invest in. They're using robo-advisors, they're using ETFs. I think that's a real plus.
The education on available online for free and even apps contribute to the accessibility of educational resources available are huge.
They are, but there's a sort of a counter problem there, and that is an overwhelming amount of information. Right. It might be that millennials are better able to sift through it, because I often hear, when I think about it, there is a line of complaint that there's too much information out there. I don't know who to trust. I find too many competing viewpoints. But as I think about it on the fly, I think it's mostly maybe older generations who are saying that, maybe boomers. I think maybe young people are better able to just sort of surf the top of this and find something that they trust and go with that. But I'm going to mention one other advantage that millennials have, and it's time. Lifespans are increasing all the time. I think millennials today will probably live well into their 90s. They'll probably work into their 70s, and I don't say that as a punishment. I say that as a fact that you're going to find a career you like, you're going to develop contacts, you're going to want to stay active and busy, you're going to think, I don't want to retire at age 60 and have like 35 years of playing shuffleboard and bridge. I want to stay active. So you're going to retire at 70, and that's going to give you a lot of flexibility in your life cycle of personal finance. Like, you don't have to have a full-time job and have a big salary at age 25. You can wait till 30. You don't have to have a big house by your early 30s. You can wait till your later 30s. You can buy the house in your late 30s, even your 40s. try to pay it off in 20 odd years, still have a good time for power saving for retirement, and you can glide into retirement if you pick the right career and sort of like work half days once you get to a certain point. I think if millennials get smart about it and stop stressing about meeting all these checkpoints like early on in life, which some of them are definitely doing, I think you're going to find that life's pretty comfortable for you, because there's this long lifespan that's going to give you more flexibility all along the way. It doesn't just mean I retire at 65 and I got 30 years. It means I could retire at 75 and I've got 20 years, but man, did I ever take it easy and de-stress my life while I was working.
Sure, that's interesting. We actually had a question written down. In what ways has retirement outlook and planning changed for millennials? But you kind of touched on that. You know, we may have a longer lifespan to look forward to, and
right.
some of the rules that were prevalent in the past are sort of out the window now.
Yeah, one of the things I think millennials have to be aware of is that they're less likely to have a pension than their parents did, and I think millennials are totally understanding of that. But it does mean that you need to be a pretty consistent retirement saver over your life. Now, the younger you start, the less stress you will have through your entire life for retirement saving. If you get in the routine of putting a little bit away, like our real life money mantra has, like basically you list all your goals and then we help you divide up your savings and decide how much money to go into everything. But we do have a slot for retirement savings. And I think it's a great idea to get used to sort of the routine and the discipline of putting a little bit of money away on a weekly or biweekly or monthly basis for retirement. It could be just a little bit, a token amount at first, and then you ramp it up as time goes by. And if you do that, you'll be fine. But if you procrastinate and wait, the longer you wait, the more you're going to have to really shovel in later on. Without pensions, there's a lot on your shoulders. They're improving the Canada Pension Plan for younger people. By the time they retire, it will be a bigger piece of the puzzle for you, but you're still going to need to do some heavy lifting on your own.
Really like your point about the kind of the scheduling of money, because I feel like a lot of millennials who are renting they don't own a home and they consider renting a sunk cost, so they don't do anything. But kind of like having a pretend mortgage where you put 15 or 10% of your income into some like investment account, doing it automated, not thinking about it, doing it first is just huge.
That is the single most important behavior for financial success, I think. Taking a chunk of your pay and putting it into savings and or investments electronically on the day you get paid. You never see the money. Your paycheck is one line in your online bank account, and the next is the debit for your savings and your investing. You do that and you ramp it up as you make more money through your life. That's the whole foundation of financial success.
Great. I think that's a great point to maybe wrap up the show here. Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to add, Rob, maybe that millennials should be thinking about when it comes to maybe starting their savings, starting their investing, going out on their own? Well,
I've talked a lot about the importance of getting started young and continuing on. I don't want people to be out there stressing if they're still in the establishing themselves in the workforce phase. I know it's tough out there. I know that there are people who are working jobs that don't pay a lot of money because they can't find something in their area. I know there are people with temporary contracts who are worried about when the next contract's coming along. There isn't a rush. You have time. Things will work out. Just give it time. You may have to invest a few years of sort of scrambling until you get comfortable. But I think, you can, even if it all comes together in your early 30s or mid 30s, that's still fine. You have time. It will work out.
If people want to reach out to you, Rob, or get more information from you, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is to send me an email, rcarrick@globeandmail.com, or just Google me. You can get me. You can DM me on Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook personal finance page. Any old which way, I respond to many emails from people of all ages every day, and I'm particularly interested in the millennial audience because I think that's the most interesting personal finance generation right now.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for joining us today, Rob. We really appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye. And now for my favorite segment, Shower Thoughts with Tyler.
Life didn't give us lemons. We created lemons.
I like that interview. As a 32-year-old millennial who's constantly worrying that I'm not doing enough, not saving enough, not paying down my debt fast enough, not owning a home, I kind of feel a little better.
You don't own a home? What a loser.
I know, such a bum.
I really liked it. I thought he was on point with a lot of things. And even as a 38-year-old that does own a home, it sort of made me feel pretty comfortable. Like, you'll retire later. There's more things to do in life than play shuffleboard.
Yeah, I didn't quite disagree with that. Like, I just want to retire now and play golf, personally. But I know it's not a reality.
A little bit more money.
A little bit more.
It's just general saving principles. Being smart about money. Pay yourself first. Pay down your debts first.
Yeah. I think one big issue is that isn't the sexiest way to think about money. You know, people, when I speak with friends, everything, like last year, the big thing, or the past couple of years, I should say, the big thing was Bitcoin or weed stocks, or, you know, so you hear all these stories about people making a lot of money on it, but you don't hear the stories about people going bust on it. And obviously there is a time and a place to invest in things like that, as long as you think of it as money that you wouldn't mind losing. But I think if one big takeaway from Carrick, his interview, is that, you know, you should be saving first. Just pay yourself first. Think of the long term, and then you'll figure out the medium term as you go.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's like the biggest thing with millennials. It's either like the housing market or nothing. And they need to start thinking, like, because houses are so expensive, we need other avenues for investing our money in. The one thing I wish we talk about a bit more was like the spending aspect, because it is hard to be frugal, you know, like
especially living in the city.
Yeah, like you want to order Uber Eats all the time. Necessities like transit passes are like $140 a month. So, but yeah, as long as you're investing your money and being conscious, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, you can worry about all the money you're spending, but if you're making the smart financial decisions from the start, you know, with the saving and the paying down debt and making sure all your bills are paid, that extra money is yours to spend.
Yeah.
So,
One of the things that I did not save, like I did not put money aside when I was younger at all. And now I'm looking at my financial outlook. But yeah, I didn't set myself up early enough, and now putting money towards, you know, and it's kind of like, oh man, I really need to. He talked about power saving later on in life. I don't even know what that means, other than like, well, now that I don't have the daycare cost, now that I don't have a mortgage cost, maybe I can take all that money that I was putting there and just dump it into an RSP. But
one thing, that I like that you brought up RESP. No, what's the student one for kids?
RESP.
RESP. Yeah. I like that you brought that up, because we didn't really touch on the older generation of millennials, the ones that are at sort of the tail end of it, or is it you, exactly. The old dogs, the grizzled millennial vets.
The vets.
You know, we think of millennials as young, but we aren't that young anymore. Gen Z's coming for us. They're coming hard for our jobs. They're smarter. They're more tech savvy. Yeah. But there is so we've faced these problems. We're burdened a little bit by debt, but we are also thinking about having families. Yeah. And some of us do have families. What does that look now while you're juggling, you know, getting into the housing market and paying down your debt, and also making sure that your kids are set up?
Like, I have 2 kids, and my daycare costs are $2,100 a month.
Shit, that's my rent.
Yeah. So when he was talking about people don't think about all the extra costs involved in owning a house, like my utility payments, like this is internet and cell phone and things like that, and gas and water and garbage takeaway. I think it's like $600 a month on top of the mortgage kind of thing. So, you know, money flies real quick.
Yeah, I think like a lot of people are just accustomed to putting their income in a calculator and be like, oh wow, I can afford an $800,000 house. I didn't even know that. But then there's like, you bring up land transfer tax and they're like, what is that? And like, we're not trying to attack housing. Like, housing is a good investment. You pay it off. It's forced savings. You know, the housing market has been doing well, but like, the difference is jumping in early because you feel like you have to versus like doing it when you're prepared. You know what's on the table. You know what it's going to cost. You have a plan.
My sister-in-law bought a house that was way overpriced, and it needs so many renovations. Like the back half of the house is falling off.
I'm going to make sure to send her this episode.
Yes, please do. So she'll laugh.
She knows.
It's okay. She knows it.
Okay.
That, like, the extension at the back has no foundation underneath it. So it's pulling away from the house.
I feel like I've made a Mike Holmes joke in a previous episode, but it's just too easy. Like, he would just come and take that all down, the whole house.
Literally
take down the whole neighborhood, actually.
Yeah. Make it right.
But you know what's interesting? Like, I tried to bring it up in the interview with the FOMO thing about home ownership, but personally, I feel like there's also FOMO with investing. Like, if I tell somebody that I'm investing in a robo-advisor and I made like 6% last year, like, oh, you just made 6%, I made like 20% because I invested in like, I don't know, some Bitcoin weed thing. And I'm just like, oh, okay.
I'm just like, I don't even look at the numbers. I'm just like, I got to put more money away. That's like about it.
The hysteria around Bitcoin. I saw this funny tweet that was like, there's a big business opportunity for CBD infused fake meat. Because those are like the 2 big things right now.
Because Beyond Meat IPO'd, right? Mm-hmm. And when they did, my buddy's, I should have invested. Jeez, man. Like,
there's always another one around the corner.
You got it. Yeah. There's more IPOs coming, and really it's
maybe set aside a little money Think of it as like an entertainment expense. And next time you think there's the next business opportunity that's going to explode, maybe buy some stock.
Yeah.
But just don't do it with money that you would be putting into a retirement fund.
Yeah.
It's maybe one way to look at it. Well, thanks for joining us this week. If you're a millennial, I hope that you enjoyed it. Also, a big thank you to Rob Carrick, who was very well-spoken, very brilliant. I think gave a lot of good points that I'm definitely going to ruminate on for a while and apply to my own personal financial life. So hopefully you guys took something away from that as well. And see you next time.
And now for the fine print.
The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by Ratehub employees are those of the employees and do not necessarily reflect the views of Ratehub Inc. or any of its sponsors or officials. This is for general use. We're not certified or licensed advisors.
Yeah, we just don't want to get sued.